Hi, everyone. Welcome to the breakout session, Modernize Your Oracle Workload to SQL. What's new? And I'm Neil. I'm a program manager in the Azure Database Engineering team from Microsoft. And today I'm going to talk about how and what are the different investments Microsoft have done in the recent times to ease the migration from Oracle to the Azure SQL workload. Today's agenda, we will start with the migration drivers, why industry or organization is considering moving from Oracle to SQL, what can be the various scenarios or reasons behind it. Now, there are various ways of migrating Oracle workload. So why SQL? What are the reasons when organization decides to move to SQL Server or Azure SQL? How does a database migration looks like, and what's the app's migration story? Because at the end, we don't migrate database, we actually migrate and modernize applications. So what are the key drivers? So when we look at the key drivers, now there are various reasons or maybe more than one reasons an organization or user might consider moving from Oracle to any other platform. And the common ones is end of life, end of support, cost savings or cost optimization, overall cloud strategy. So they pick up, let's say, Azure or so on. So they have a public cloud strategy. And as I said before, it's not about migrating database, it's also modernizing the application. So doing a greenfield applications or microservices, how it can blend and how analytics and well as OLTP data can coexist. And that's where the Microsoft Synapse Analytics plays a great role. So with all these various reasons, and as I said, it's not just one of the reason, it can be multiple reasons of all these various scenarios where customer actually considers moving from Oracle to any other platform such as SQL. So when we take a decision now, there can be various options of moving Oracle to Azure. Now, if you look at and as any kind of life cycle of assessment or migration, you connect to the source, you discover, you plan, you prioritize your workload, and then you choose a methodology which can be rehosting, which is like a lift and shift game, which is like replatforming, lift and reshape, and then refactor, where you actually re-architect some of the code, some of the application, so that you can make it compatible with other kind of targets. So in the lift and shift, you can move your Oracle to a Oracle VM. Microsoft offers multiple VM options. You can choose Azure Bare Metal. That's another alternative. And the very recent announcement where we also have, you can have your database on OCI, and you can connect from the applications which is in Azure, and you can go ahead and connect using OCI DB Pass. While these are some of the lift and shift and the rehost and replatform, now we also have refactor options where we basically kind of consider OLTP as well as data warehouse workloads. So OLTP workloads is Azure SQL, Azure Postgres, and Azure Cosmos databases. And SQL has multiple flavors like SQL DB, SQL MI, and SQL VM. And Postgres also has Flex Server and Hyperscale CTOS. Now, there can be another scenario where you have an Oracle data warehouse or a reporting and you want to migrate, then Synapse becomes a preferred choice. A lot of customers, they also kind of use business critical or SQL hyperscale, which is a SQL DB option, but SQL Synapse is one of the alternative for the warehouse workloads. And finally, Cosmos DB, which is our NoSQL, where it's more about JSON based, schema less, time traversing kind of data. Then the with the JSON support of Cosmos DB and various other options available, customers go ahead and move from the RDBMS to the NoSQL world of Cosmos DB. So we just straight away get into the Oracle to SQL scenarios. So when we take the Oracle to SQL scenarios, we any organization or any user base actually starts with a discovery and assessment. You need to discover your Oracle workloads, whether it's 11G, 12C, 18C, and so on. Whether it's on premise, whether it's in other cloud, it's in Azure, or it can be in any platform, right? So how can you discover your Oracle workload and then you assess it? And at the time of assessment, the assessment actually divided into two sections. The first is more about the planning phase, where you are trying to get a business case. Does it make sense to migrate or convert it from Oracle to SQL, or does it make sense lift and shift or DBS and so DBPaaS and so on. So in the business case, what are the consideration is what might be the operational cost, what will be the target sizing, how the what is a suitable target for such kind of Oracle workload in SQL, and what will be the ROI for that particular kind of SQL target. The second is a migration when you actually have gone ahead and did all the analysis. It's about getting into the implementation mode where you actually start data profiling. Are there blob data? Are there kind of large data? Is it an online or offline data movement? Can I group schemas together? And so on. So various kind of data profiling to see what will be the migration strategy, data migration strategy looks like. The next is a code conversion, and this is where the most of the time we spend when we are doing a migration which is a heterogeneous migration where the source and target are of different platform, where you kind of get an estimate. Hey, what will be the conversion estimate? What is the risk? What is the testing strategy which we have? What is the remediation kind of options? Not every PLSQL can be converted to T-SQL and so on, right? So what is the what can be done manually? What can be done automatically by some of the tools available in the market? So those kind of code conversion assessment uh, exercise which you need to do. Now, this is an iterative. This is a time consuming, and it depends on system to system, capabilities to capabilities. So that's why having a comprehensive tools for robot assessment, creating a predictable business case can help to kind of migrate to Azure SQL. So how does an assessment workflow looks like? When you do an assessment, you connect to the Oracle, you collect certain metadata, and the metadata is not just restricted like edition and version. It can be also shallow and deep assessment. Now, when I say shallow assessment, you try to understand the objects, try to understand the features, you try to understand the usage pattern, and so on. That is a shallow assessment. In the deeper assessment, you actually start peeling each and every syntax, each and every line of stored procedure, each and every line of packages or functions. And that is a very, very detailed kind of activity which you need to embrace as a part of this whole migration strategy. So we do the code conversion assessment, we do the metadata collector, and what are the metadata, different metadata we collect? We collect performance matrix, we collect data distribution, configuration, object inventory, and assessment report. Right. So we just not collect the code. We also collect some of the performance, some of the features, and based on that, we create a report. And in the report, as a step, you actually do a data profile, target sizing, categorization, whether which schemas you want to pick. You might have an Oracle instance with 50 schemas. And you want to do in a phased manner. You don't want to do a big bang and let, hey, all the applications migrate at the same time, but you might in a realistic, you actually do in a phased manner. So which is the simple ones, which is the medium ones? Typically keep the re-architect and the complex one somewhere in the middle or at the end. At least you start with something simple and medium complexity, you get your hands dirty, and then you start tackling those complex and the re-architect ones. And everything when you're looking looking at it and moving to Azure Cloud, you're thinking about the operational cost and what will be the and how you can define a TCO where you just not only consider the operational cost of running the SQL compute and storage, but also you need to factor in the total cost for migration, total cost for code conversion, the resource cost, and so on. So we need to factor in while the target sizing is the run cost, but then there are many one-time costs you need to take till you go through the complete your stabilization phase. So all our migration options we have centrally look kind of posted in database This is a go-to or a one-stop place where you can get, as you see, all the various flavors: Oracle to Azure Postgres, SQL Server, SQL database, VMs, as well as Synapse Analytics. So we kind of for every kind of path you would like to proceed, we have a specific guidelines and specific steps. Though more or less it's remains same, but there are certain nuances and certain subtleties. Like there are certain features and capabilities which is not there in SQLDB, is there in SQL. There are certain features like distributed transactions, elastic queries, and so on. So you need to understand those differences and decide what is a suitable target. Then why SQL? Now, as you have seen in the previous slide, we have so many different options: Oracle to Postgres, SQL, Synapse, and so on. Then why SQL? Now, when we look at the SQL, the first and foremost is the highlight is a breakthrough productivity and performance. So without doubt, this is one of the most scalable with the latest study where we are not only breakthrough productivity and performance, we are actually at a competitive TCO where very kind of significant low run cost, right? And with the additional benefit of Azure hybrid benefit where you can bring your own license, and if you have a software assurance, you can go ahead and apply those hybrid benefits. You can do a reserve capacity. That means you can lock it for 1 year or 3 years, and based on that, you get a great discount in the Azure run cost, right? So the TCO, so great performance and productivity with a very competitive TCO. But while that is the kind of very immediate, tangible benefit, but there are a lot of other benefits which comes as a part of overall package when you move to Azure SQL database. Industry-led security. We are one of the most kind of secure databases, right? Year over year, right? And we always continue to kind of make it even better. We are adding more and more features, like we introduce SQL Ledger, we support Key Vault, we support encryption, always encrypted, virtual networks, and so on. So we have security boundaries and parameters applied many areas. And then with a built-in intelligence where a self-tuning or a self-tuning suggestion where based on the adaptive query methods, processing actually based on your queries, your patterns, your workload, the optimizer can go ahead and recommend and apply those changes and make your system more performant. So when we move to Azure SQL Database, we usually have four types of deployments. The singleton deployment, where you have a single Azure SQL database, and that single database can be SQL general purpose, SQL business critical, and we plan to support hyperscale very soon. Then we have Elastic Pool when the SQL database as a target. And today you can go ahead and use Elastic Pool on a scenario when you have multiple databases which has a different peak time and usage patterns. The third kind of deployment is managed instance. And in the managed instance, we'll go ahead and give you an instance which gives you a best of both, where you don't have to worry about managing the servers, but it has more feature parity and feature readiness between the SQL on-premise and SQL on a PaaS.
And finally, SQL and VM. If you want to choose a VM deployment, you can go ahead and host VM. Now, the tools today which we have, we support SQL Singleton, which is general purpose, business critical, and hyperscale in pipeline. We support any kind of managed instance and also SQL VM, running SQL all the way from 2008 till the latest 2019, and we will support 2022 very shortly. So, what are the different migration phase? The migration is a journey which you need to start at a very early phase of assessment, discovery, and assessment. And when you do a discovery and assessment, you try to understand not just whether which Oracle database version or edition. You do a shallow as well as a deep assessment. A shallow assessment will be you do ahead and get like what are the features being used in Oracle, how many tables, how many views, how many lines of code, what are the various kind of performance load. So the based on that, what will be the right kind of target skew. So those are shallow assessment. And when you do a deep assessment is when you look at every line of code, whether it's a SQL package, whether it's a stored procedure functions, and evaluate those the complexity and find a feasibility for it. So once you do an assessment and you are quite like with the all the values and figures you processed and churned during the assessment phase, the next step is the conversion. And this is where the whole project implementation starts, where you actually start converting. We have tools which can go ahead and convert a lot of PL/SQL to T-SQL. We also have scenarios where it might not be able to convert directly. So we give you certain remediation plan. And there are some scenarios where there is no direct mapping between the PLSQL and SQL using our tools, so which needs a manual intervention. We keep improving our product, SQL Server Migration Assessment, and to add more and more capabilities. So conversion is the next where you start converting the Oracle code to a SQL compatible code. Once you've done the schema conversion, the next phase is the migrate. And during the migrate, what you do is you actually migrate the data. And migrating data means you can do an offline mode and online mode based on the data profile, based on the kind of RPO and RTO. You can go ahead and utilize offline approach, which is one time sync, whereas you can do an online where there is a delta sync all the time, and then you go ahead and do the assessment. Finally, the optimize. The optimize is migration is a never-ending journey. So you go ahead and optimize the workload. You use new capabilities like column store index, in-memory OLTP, and start kind of improving the converted workload. You try to use new capabilities like should I move from SQL DB to SQL serverless, instead of provision to serverless scenarios, and so on, to how do I optimize from the cost, from the feature, from performance, and so on. Now, as I said, migration process, we have introduced a latest capability, which will go ahead and do an assessment. In this assessment, it goes checks the features, the high level workload, and it does a categorization like simple, medium, and so on. And along with that, it also gives you a target recommendation. Then we have a tool like SSMA, which does the code assessment. It will go ahead assess your code, and then we do a migrate. And for the migrate and data sync, you can go ahead and utilize our first party products, which is SSMA, or you can use third party products as well for the data migration. And the final is the complete loop of optimize, do the testing, do the performance test. It goes in a loop, remediate, run functional test, optimize, and until you reach a level of which is acceptable in your benchmark test. So with this, I will go ahead and show you a new demo experience of Oracle assessment. Our new assessment is available in Azure Data Studio. You might be familiar with SQL Developer if you're coming from Oracle background. You might be familiar with SQL Server Management Studio, if you are familiar with SQL. Azure Data Studio, it's another IDE which is being available for quite few many years, and where we are not only bringing SQL but all the other database types, assessments, and database admin as well as development work. So you need to go ahead for a new assessment, database migration assessment for Oracle. You can go ahead and download it and install. It is available in the marketplace. It has a dependency on .NET Runtime and extension for Oracle. And when you install this extension, it actually goes ahead and installs the dependence as well. Once you have installed the Oracle assessment, you can connect to the Oracle servers. Now, I already have connected like 12C and 19C, but if you want, you can go ahead and click on the server details. And when you click on the server, you can choose Oracle and provide your Oracle server details here and click connect, right? I have already connected to 19C. So let me show you the new experience. So this is the migration assessment. So in the migration assessment, first it shows a dashboard which has the last 5 assessments where you can start your new assessment and the view the latest assessment. Along with that, it has all the necessary help articles which is required for you to get started. So I'll go ahead and click a new assessment. So I'll go ahead and give a name, demo DPS 1, 2, 3. I have you can choose the target. Today we support target as SQL only. Then you have a scale factor. Scale factor is particularly related to right sizing or target sizing. Suppose you're running the performance data collection, but you know the peak load is maybe month end or is in the year end during Christmas. But right now, you know the data collection which you do is maybe 50% representation of your peak. So you can go ahead and select as 2 because you know that your peak is double X, right? So you go ahead and select the scale factor, and the percentile utilization is, hey, do I want to consider average? Do I want to consider like CPU? If the CPU requirement, do I consider the 90th percentile CPU or 95 percentile CPU data and so on? And once you have filled it, you click on Start Assessment. It shows in progress. Also, when you go to assessment page, you will go ahead and see all the various assessments which you have executed in past. You have an option to download the report. So when I go ahead and download, it actually goes ahead and downloads an HTML report, which you can go ahead and consume it or share it with internally or externally with your team or with your customer or your client and so on. Before I click on the download report, let's go ahead and see one assessment. So I already did an assessment. So when you look at the assessment, you will see a summary page where it captures the host name, the instance name, and how much performance data collection it has done, what is the time it required to do the assessment, and then recommendation for all the 3 possible Azure SQL target, which is Azure SQL DB, MI, and VM. Along with that, we choose the readiness here. It looks like this is a pretty easy to do conversion from Oracle to SQL, and it also has 310 simple schemas, whereas one re-architect schema. The feature compatibility score, it will be something which is very useful, where if you want to migrate an HADR capability or a performance capability into SQL, how much is the migration effort required to include that feature capability in SQL, or how do you emulate or simulate that behavior in SQL? And final here at the bottom of the card, you have the SKU recommendation where it talks about business critical Gen 5, 2 vCore in case of SQL DB. In MI, it's 4 vCore. And in case of SQL VM, it gives E2DS. So it gives you the VM type as well, along with the whether it's a SQL on Linux or SQL on Windows. What is the suggested for this scenario? Now, when you go to view report details, you find more details about the summary where we talk about, hey, how much is the conversion hours? So we need around 672 hours to convert this Oracle to the SQL compatible target. We also see provide the algorithm or a high level matrix like code objects, storage objects, efficient estimated hours. What are those parameters which we kind of use to give the recommendation? Next is the database details. The database details, we provide ORCL, the name, the type, the database role, the database size, the number of schemas, what are the whether it's a rack enabled, is it a flashback enabled, and then a schema level kind of study and give you an understanding whether how many simple schemas, how many complex schemas, and how many re-architect and so on. So if you look at Oracle demo, it's a 201 estimated hours, but it is 476 tables, 74 triggers, so it is still simple. Now Oracle test, 383 materialized views, and there is no direct equivalence of materialized views. You might convert to index views, so on. So it needs a re-architect, and that makes under even though the estimated hours is 291, which is close to 201, but because of feature challenge, we actually back it into re-architect. The SKU recommendation provides more details, what kind of SKU and why we have suggested a particular SKU here. So the requirement is 1 vCore, but the minimum size is 4 vCore. The storage requirement, what is the storage requirement? What is your IOPS requirement? Your IOPS requirement is 2 milliseconds, so we are suggesting business critical. And IOPS, what is your so that's the latency and what is your throughput, and based on that we actually provide a business critical Gen 5. We also provide the source details like it's a CPU, memory, OS, and so on. Feature compatibility, we go ahead and provide. So the Oracle feature which is being used, what might be the closest SQL, and what is the capability migration effort, right? 4 means it's pretty easy to kind of emulate this behavior or kind of business capability in your SQL environment. For example, Active Data Guard, if you use readable secondary, we can easily go ahead and use it. For example, if you want to do a bitmap indexes. Now, bitmap indexes, we don't, there is no SQL bitmap index. So you might have to create other indexing strategy, filter index, and so on, or you rely on bitmap operator, which is available in our query optimizer. So based on this inputs, you will make a decision whether you want to kind of convert and bring this feature in SQL or not. And if you have to do, you need to put more effort because it's a ranked as 3. So it is not an easy migration of when you want to use this feature in your SQL environment. Now, the final is an ability to download. So you can go ahead and download a combined report from here as well. And when you download a combined report, you go ahead and view the report, and it is a proper HTML report with everything is coming in a um, report form, and you can go ahead and share it and store it and save it and use it and refer it for future purpose. And you can go ahead delete an assessment. So if you don't need it, you can click on delete, and it just goes ahead and deletes the assessment. And so if you have any other assessments which you don't need it, you can go ahead and delete the assessments as well. While we talked about the SQL Server migration assessment, which is used for conversion, previously I have talked about the database migration assessment for Oracle. Here, when we talk about, we do a deep discovery where SQL 2012 and above, Azure SQL, and convert each and every database objects and migrate and then validate the data which has been moved. So how is that workflow? The workflow is you first create an SSMA project, and that is going to act as an anchor for your entire migration for that particular project. Now you need to connect to the Oracle database and SQL, right? Because it is a source target pair combo project, right? And then you start mapping the Oracle to SQL schemas. You create an assessment report. Once you assess the report, you understand the complexity and the effort required, and what are the challenges which you will encounter when you're trying to migrate it or convert it to SQL. Then you go ahead, make some changes, and apply those changes on your SQL. You migrate the schema, and once you migrate the schema, then you go ahead and create uh, an empty shell database, and then followed by loading the uh, data, which can be an offline or online, where you can do a one-time data load or an incremental data load. And then once every data load is done, your new SQL is at the same kind of data level. It has exactly the same data as you have in Oracle. Then you go ahead and do the cutover. And once you do the cutover, you can redirect your applications. So you not only just do migration of the schemas, you can also migrate data. And when you want to do a migration of data, you can use a client side or you can use a server side approach. And when you use a client side or a server side approach, in the server side approach, we go ahead and use the power of SQL Azure SQL agent. When you do a client side, we will go ahead and use the power, the CPU memory of the machine on which you are running the SQL Server migration assessment. So let's go ahead and see a demo of schema conversion using SQL Server migration assessment.
So I already have an Oracle SSMA project just to save some time. So what you do is go to File and you go to Open Project and you select the demo, right? So I have created a demo project, and when you do that, it actually loads that project. And when you do a loading of the project, or when you actually create a new project, you actually go ahead and connect to the Oracle and then connect to the SQL. So let me connect to the Oracle and provide the Oracle details. And you can go ahead and pick and choose any of the workloads. So I'm going to select the most easiest or the most popular one, which is the HR one. Now, trust me, in the reality, there are more complex ones, right? So I'm going to use this demo HR and click OK. This is just to give you an understanding how the capability works. So it goes ahead and connects to the Oracle and loads various schema objects, which is like tables, procedures, functions, and so on, right? And we what we do is we run this in a sequential way, right? So we don't parallelize the data collection. So though it takes longer time, but we ensure it doesn't load or put resource pressure on your Oracle instance. So that is the reason we go ahead, and when we are doing the assessment, we actually go ahead and make it a serialized one. When you do the data movement, you can do data movement in various ways. You can do data movement using SSMA, what migrate data option, and then you can do migrate data at scale. And that is where we introduce some kind of parallelism, because data migration needs to happen quickly, and you need more throughput, and that's when we do the we rely on the parallelism activity. Now, it takes few minutes to load a small application schema, but as the schema kind of changes, or you have more objects and more stored like line of code, it will take longer time. Usually a small to medium takes few minutes to an hour, whereas complex ones I have seen it goes for 4 hours or 6 hours and so on. Once you connect to the Oracle, then you connect to the SQL Server. And here I'm going to select a local SQL Server here. So I go ahead and select. It says SQL Server agent is not running, which is fine, and which is only for data migration. And at this point, I am more interested in the data conversion, the schema conversion, not the data movement. Now, once you have connected Oracle and the SQL, you can choose the schema which you want and you can highlight it and you can say create report, right? When you do a create report, what it does, it connects to the Oracle instance. It loads a lot of more detailed data, granular data, and then it creates a report where the tool SSMA has an ability to convert and migrate to a SQL compatible statement. And there are certain scenarios where SSMA could not convert. So it will give you the errors and warnings and the ratio of how much percent of date the schema objects could be converted, how many are not. It also gives you like there are certain invalid means the stored procedure functions which is not kind of compiled or they have been modified after compiled, so those are invalid objects, so we exclude those invalid objects, and then it actually starts assessing the schemas. When it does the assessment, it creates a chart. Here it shows there are 28 objects with a manual conversion of 5.3 hours, and the error is 14%, where the warning is 10%, and automatically it can convert 75% of the object, which is a pretty good number, right? Now, the total migration effort or conversion effort, to be precise, it needs a 5 hour. At the bottom, you have errors and warnings. In the errors, it says, hey, there are certain unparsed SQL, there are target data type which is not compatible with identity, there are identity column which generated by default clause are not supported. So these are various scenarios where it is not supported, right? So and then what you can do is you can go ahead and highlight each and every kind of uh, level, and you can go to the code object where it shows this issue, and then it actually gives you the unparsed SQL and why it could not parse a given statement, and it says failed to parse this statement, and it says that it could not convert a particular statement, right? Similarly for tables like countries, it says, hey, there is a one warning, and if you go ahead and highlight, it says conversion from number. We don't support double data type, right? So if you have a double data type and we want to convert in SQL, we convert to float or we convert to decimal and so on. So there might be a data precision issue or data loss issue, right? So it has converted, but there are some um, kind of application behavior change or the application data change, which you need to understand and see whether that is acceptable or that is not acceptable in your environment. Similarly, apart from the tables, it actually go to the views, and in the views says that, hey, there is a with read only attribute, and in Oracle the views in SQL there is no read only attribute available in the SQL, right? So this gives you a good summary of assessment. Now you want to do the actual conversion, right? So when you want to do an actual conversion, and let's assume that you go to this view and click on that view. Now you have the text available. You can go ahead and get all this kind of structure, the type mappings. Do you want to change the default, like as I said, double to float? Do you want to change it? Do you want to change from double to, let's say, decimal? So you can go ahead and edit whatever mapping requirement you have. So with all these changes, you make some changes and you say, hey, I think I'm good. Let me go ahead and convert. Now, when we do a convert, we actually convert the schema in the project. We really don't go ahead and convert the schema at the target, right? So we actually, and it will go ahead and give says, hey, conversion failed with zero errors and one warnings. And then what you can do is you can expand the HR and you will see that, okay, there are views, there are tables which has been migrated and so on, right? And when you click on the views, you will see the SQL script available. Now, a lot of times, even though script is there, you want to change it, right? You want to change some behavior. So what you do is you can go ahead and kind of script out. So we have an option of scripting out. So right click and do a script out, and you will be able to script it out. right? So quick info, SQL, formatted SQL, and so on. So you can go ahead and kind of script out. Otherwise, if you are satisfied the change, you can go ahead and deploy at the target, right? So that is another option which you can go ahead and do it. And once you have gone ahead and converted, you actually go ahead and synchronize. So the way you can go ahead and synchronize is copy the statement or do a synchronization of the schemas, and it will go ahead and synchronize the data. Synchronize the schema objects. So with the synchronization activity done, now you will have a schema which is exactly the same as what you have seen in the SQL. Now, Now, going back, now what we have done through graphical interface, we can also do from console. So if you want to automate large conversions, or if you want to build a product or package using this SSMA, so you can wrap this using a console mode, and you can go ahead and run it as a standalone console app. You can, for more details, you can look at our documentation, but the reason I wanted to highlight this is there is a console ability to automate and migrate for large kind of assessments. Now, data movement offline versus online, and this is something where you really need to understand your system, or if you're working for a customer or working for an end users, you need to understand their requirements. What is the RTO? What is the RPO? How complex it is? How much business? What will be the business loss if the system is down for longer time? Do I need to maintain the Oracle and the SQL side by side for long, or it will be a just one-time cutover? Will there be a dual run so the batches will run in the both systems twice, and then as you stabilize, you'll go ahead and remove the Oracle one, and so on. So it is a completely a very process and KPI driven kind of approach. You have to decide whether offline or online. So in the initial data sync, there are various options. SSMA is today what I will cover, and Azure Data Factory integration with SSMA. You can also use our products like Azure Databricks or Databox and migrate for initial data sync. The incremental, which is a CDC, right? As the data changes, you want to replicate the data. For that, also, you can use our SQL Server integration services. And we have a CDC where all the insert, update, deletes, you can go ahead and replicate it. You can use, again, Data Factory or Databricks. And there are third-party solutions available which are quite popular in the market, and you can go ahead and create and use those third-party data replication tools to replicate between Oracle and SQL. So let's do a data migration demo. So for the data migration demo, we have two options. The first is you do a migrate data, and when you do a migrate data, you need to connect to the source, to connect to the destination, and it actually prepares the tables, and then it starts converting, and then it gives you a report for success and failures. And if it's a failure, you need to go ahead and investigate. So let's look at the output. So it says that it gives you a warning that do you want to continue because there is already data and it will be deleted, so it will be an override. Do you want to continue? Cancel and click continue. And when you continue, it actually overrides the data. It takes few seconds to minutes based on the number of rows, and it goes ahead and gives, hey, we have gone ahead and migrated this many rows. There is a table HR persons, and why we couldn't create because there is no table, because we have migrated few objects but not all of the objects. You can save the report and then you can click close, right? Similarly, when you want to do a migration at scale, you go ahead and leverage the power of data factory. This is a very new capability which we introduced in SSMA. And the reason is data factory is a Microsoft Azure product which gives a scalable data migration ability, right? So when you have big databases which are in terabytes in size, why don't we go ahead and migrate it easily, right? So you choose your Azure subscriptions and tenant, and you go next. You provide your credentials, and then you select the resources. Now you can go ahead and create the resource from here, but I already have created certain resources, so I'll go ahead and use my existing resource. I'm going to use my existing data factory, and I'm going to use my existing integration runtime. But you can go ahead and create your own from here as well. Right. And once you have selected all the Azure resources which will be utilized for this migration, you go ahead and give a name. I say demo DPS, DPS1. Okay. And then click finish. So when you do a finish, it says, hey, one target is doesn't exist. Would you like to continue? I said yes. So it goes ahead and creates a link. It goes ahead further and creates a lot of objects in the Azure Data Factory, some link services, some um, data sets, some pipelines. And once all these are created, it will go ahead and allow you to make some changes and further kind of deploy it, right? And if you want to monitor it, you need to click the link of your data factory, and there it will show ahead the in progress pipeline. And once the pipeline completed, you can go ahead and validate the data if the data got modified, whether satisfy your requirement or not, right? So this is a great capability which we have recently launched, and we would go ahead. So you see that it's in progress, and it's going to take some time. There are some success failures, but overall, you see there are certain preview for my previous runs, but this is what in progress, and then it completes after, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes. So just to show one which completes, so here it's all a success, and you will quickly understand, okay, we have some pre-scripts, you have some execute pipeline, and then so what we do is we drop the foreign keys, we drop certain constraints, we import the data, and we actually recreate the constraints and recreate the foreign keys, right? So that's the workflow which we follow. Now, with this, you can do at-scale migration. You can go ahead and handle scenarios where you have large databases, but you really can't rely on a client tool, and that's where this new feature will going to help. However, if you have very limited downtime, then your option is to go ahead and use some Spark logic, some CDC logic using SSIS, or you can go ahead and utilize certain capabilities such as third-party products which can do data transfer between one source and target. Now, while we do the data migration and kind of the schema conversion, there are a lot of kind of settings, project settings and the global settings, which is quite important because these are the various knobs with which you can control the behavior, right? So, for example, is null, is concat, cast row num as integers, schema to schema, what is the default mapping, converting, returning, conversion of merge statement using a merge statement. If you don't want conversion of merge and divide into some other option, you can go ahead and divide into interrupt, delete, convert transact TPC system statements, and so on. Along with that, there are batch size, and this is what I was talking about. You can choose a client side and server side batch, and when you do a server side, that's when the data movement will happen using a SQL agent job. So that is another option version, and we have more information in our docs, and you can try it. And then you have batch size, the check constraints, key by identity, and parallelism, right? So you can go ahead and pick and choose custom, and you can say, hey, how many number of threads you are going to use for parallelism. Right? So there are a lot of tweaks and knobs available. Similarly, for synchronization, for graphical interface, how many rows you want to show in the output console, and so on. And finally, the mapping, right? Mapping at the project. You define, hey, blob will be converted to var binary, character will be converted into character, varchar max, and so on. So you can go ahead and create the mappings. You can apply the mappings as argument type, column, local variables, and return types. So you can do various kinds of mapping here. So with the data migration completed, the next is app migration. Now, when we do the app migration, you can go ahead and migrate to an IaaS, or you can use a PaaS or containers. Like you can move to Azure App Service, you can move to containers or Kubernetes, and so on. Now, the way you go ahead and modernize, similarly, you need to go ahead and modernize your workload. You can do a lift and shift, or you can do a innovation using Azure Functions, etc. To make it, we have a tool, and we have all pre-recorded videos for this in past, but this is a database access migration toolkit, which is very useful, where you it will go ahead and parse your Java, C Sharp kind of statements, extract the SQL statements from the Oracle, and then it will go ahead and those scripts you can go ahead and run it through the SSMA. The way you do it is from DAMT, you can extract the scripts, and then what you do is you go ahead, and if you look at, we also have statements, right? So into the statements, you can go ahead and add some ad hoc statements, and with that, you will be able to add more and more statements, and which will go ahead and pass those statements and convert to SQL. So post migration, you need to remediate. You need to performance test. For performance test, try to baseline, try to see if the application response time is good. Does it match your SLAs? Go through this whole optimize cycle, where you go ahead, because even though SSMA converts a statement Oracle to SQL, but there may be a lot of optimization and new features like in-memory OLTP, column store index, and so on, which you can apply and reap more benefit out of it. And once you actually did the optimize, you go ahead and redirect the application. We also have a capability called SSMA tester, where you can go ahead and test the capabilities, and you can get the application behavior and see whether the application will work same as it would have worked in Oracle and in SQL. So let me go ahead and show a quick demo of SSMA tester. So when you go to the tester, you will have test cases. You can go ahead and add test. You can say demo one. You can choose, let's say, tables. I'm going to choose regions, and next. And then in the target, I'm going to choose regions, finish. So what it does, it creates a test, and then you can run the test. And in this, I'm testing just the tables. You can test stored procedures, functions. You need to connect to the source. Then it connects to the destination. It loads certain packages. So it says row ID not found. and finalization and report. So when you click on the report, um, it says it's a success, and details it says the table results matches. Now, if the table doesn't match, it will say as a test results as failure, and you go ahead and fix the values, or if it's a stored procedure, you go ahead and fix those statements. So SSMA tester can be used for table whether the tables are identical. That's exactly as shown in the demo. Whether the output parameters of a stored procedure and functions will be same. Whether the function returns the same results and other results is identical. Right. Suppose if you query and the output, let's say it comes as USA. In case of SQL is US of America, then it will not say. It will show as error, right? I hope in this session you learned about what are the various ways of migrating Oracle to SQL? What are the motivation factors for various users and organizations? What are the tools available? Whether the new assessment experience, which gives you the right sizing, which talks about the feature parity and the workload categorization, or the deep dive capability of conversion and migration using SSMA as well as using data factory, baked in data factory behavior. And finally, as a part of the continuous flow of optimization and testing, how you can use the tester capability to kind of simplify your one-time migration activity from Oracle to SQL.